Hey, it's Benjie Cole, son of Al Cole from CBS Radio and host of People of Distinction, the talk that gives an in-depth view of some of the most dynamic, intelligent, and successful people on the planet. Run to our website, peopleofdistinction.org for more info, or you can always email me directly at benji@alcoleenterprises.com. And on the line with us today, we have Sharon Dexter. We're going to be discussing her amazing book, I Will Not Be Silent, Praying in Psalms. Available for purchase through Amazon, BarnesandNoble.com. But people, listen, if you want to gather everything that Sharon has in store, well, do yourself a favor and head directly to her personal site. And that's godsfaithfulpromise.com. There you'll find more information on Sharon, more information on this fantastic narrative, I Will Not Be Silent. But in addition to that, people, get this. Sharon has written 9 other titles. That's right, 10 books in totality as of now. Hopefully, more on the horizon. But when you head on over to her website, godsfaithfulpromise.com, you're going to see all 10 titles there, as well as the hyperlinks set up to take you to the purchasing pages. So one more time, that's godsfaithfulpromise.com. And I will say, Sharon was brought to our network, People of Distinction, today by some of the best publishers in the business, Parchment Global Publishing. So if you or anybody you know have a book that they'd like moved, give yourself the best gift you could possibly give and move it through Parchment. And you can find out more information on them and their fantastic team at parchmentglobalpublishing.com. People, it is an absolute pleasure to have Sharon here on the line. Now, the moment you head to her Amazon page, her Barnes & Noble page, or directly through her personal site, godsfaithfulpromise.com, and you start to do any research on her book, well, you're instantly going to understand what we're discussing today. Now, it's a devotional, okay? And it's really created with the emphasis on attempting its readers to deepen their relationship with God and their religion. Now, it really is going to encompass Sharon's journey and her specific conversations that she held with God. And through that, you're going to be able to gather so much wisdom that you can then take and utilize into your day-to-day lives, in your relationship, in your journey that you're taking. Now, listen, Sharon is the expert. She's written the book. She's the one that had the conversations. And she's going to be able to articulate everything much better than I ever could. So without further ado, let's jump right in. Sharon, first and foremost, welcome to People of Distinction, and thank you very much for being a guest with us today. How are you doing?
Thank you, Benji. Thank you very much myself.
Listen,
Thank you.
It's an absolute pleasure, Sharon. Thank you very much for being a guest, and we're truly looking forward to this. Now, I know we have a lot of information to cover pertaining to the book itself. But Sharon, before we go into the narrative, start by telling our listening audience a little bit more about yourself and your background, please.
Well, I was born in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. In the 5th grade, we moved to a small town in Upper Michigan where we lived for several years until we moved back to Wisconsin. When I graduated from high school, I went to Wartburg College in Waverly. Wartburg is a small Lutheran college which the day I graduated, I married my college sweetheart. I got one son of whom I'm very, very pleased. And then I was just teaching for 30 years, or over 30 years, until I retired.
Sharon, let me be the first person to tell you here. You said you were teaching for 30 years. That is absolutely incredible, and my listening audience knows this. I had a very brief stint in education myself. I taught for 4 years, but I have a lot of family members as well as very close friends that are educators themselves. And let me just be the first person to tell you here on our network, Sharon, thank you very much for all the work that you put forth. I mean, anybody that's in that world, anybody that comes from that background understands educators never receive the amount of credit that they deserve, and they don't get paid nearly enough, right, for the amount of hats that they have to wear. Because, listen, we all know you may be assigned to teach social studies. You may be assigned to teach algebra or whatever the course itself is, but we know as educators, there's times you're going to need to be a therapist. There's times you're going to need to be a nurse. There's times you're going to need to be a referee. I mean, listen, the amount of hats that you have to wear as an educator is absolutely astounding. And again,
Sure.
educators never get the amount of credit that they deserve. So, Sharon, thank you very much for all the work that you put forth in really shaping, molding, and developing the minds of future generations, because we are forever indebted to you and educators.
About elementary school. Third,
That's
fourth, or fifth graders mostly.
that's beautiful. Yeah, I taught fourth grade myself, and I absolutely loved them. At first they always they push the boundaries a little because fourth grade they're about
Oh,
eight,
sure they
9 years old.
They sure do push the boundaries.
Oh, yeah, they do. Yeah. Well, because, by that point, at that age, they're now starting to test authority, right? Because they're not as afraid of authority, and they're really now pushing the boundaries, right? And again, from a philosophical standpoint, it's amazing to watch their minds develop and how they go about that. From a teaching perspective, there were some days that it was not fun, Sharon. I was not having a good time.
For sure. Times I would want to quit.
Yeah, absolutely. But they were great kids. I ultimately ended up falling in love with them. They were wonderful, wonderful kids, and thoroughly enjoyed it. But listen, Sharon, I could talk to you about my stint in education. I can talk to you about your 30 years in education for hours. But the purposes of today's interview is all about your book, I Will Not Be Silent. So without further ado, tell us a little bit more about your narrative.
Well, I started writing in a back corner out of McDonald's. Perfect little spot. The distractions weren't too bad. Made some pretty good new friends in the process. And when they decided to remodel, I lost my spot. But for the most part, I've been writing poetry. That was after the devotional. Devotional is my response to God's blessings.
Sharon, I want to talk about inspiration for a second. So, what inspired you to write this narrative?
I'm not sure. It was just, excuse me, it was God inspired me. He just did a number on my heart, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Now, with regards to writing, was writing something you always had a passion for? I mean, obviously, this is not the only book that you've written. As I mentioned to our listening audience, I mean, this is one of 10 books so far that you've comprised. So was writing a hobby of yours growing up? Were there particular writers that inspired you? Talk to us a little bit more about the love for creative writing.
My mother was a writer for many years. My father, not so much. My sister was a writer. I don't think my brother was. Growing up, my mother's writing was quite inspirational. She wrote for many church papers and things like that. Was published in many books there.
Fantastic. Now, with regards to this book, Sharon, I know that this is culminating, as I mentioned before, in conversations that you have had with God. Now, one of the hopes of this book is really to be utilized as a tool for your readers to help strengthen their relationship with God and really deepen their connection with their religion. Now, Sharon, I want to take this opportunity for anybody that's out there that is on that journey, that is looking to strengthen their relationship, strengthen their connection with their religion and also with God. What are some words of wisdom that you can offer them that maybe that you picked up along your journey that you'd like to offer as words of wisdom for them?
Well, take a quiet time every day. Spend time with God. That's what I've always done. Not always, but once I started, I stopped. it's really something else to spend that quality time with God first thing in the morning, an hour spent.
I love it. I love it. Listen, guys, find a quiet place, right? And just have the discussion. Right, just start talking. I absolutely accept. Listen, I think, and just let me speak from my own experience here, Sharon. You know, on my own journey, my listening audience knows this. I've always been someone that has considered myself more spiritual than religious. Now, that doesn't mean I don't have my own curiosities or interests in deepening my faith. And I remember growing up, and one thing that I always was so concerned about was, well, how do I talk to God? I mean, I just, isn't there like a certain prayer that I'm supposed to say, or there's a certain format that I'm supposed to follow? Like, you know, it's like when you're praying, is there something that I'm supposed to do that is kind of categorized as like a stamp that's going to send it to him, right? Like, I can't just talk. I need to actually sign, seal it, and deliver it in a certain way. And, you know, I remember I had a very religious friend of mine, and you know, she really opened my eyes to it. And she said, Benjie, listen, God he's our father, right? We're his children.
They're friends.
And he just wants to have a conversation with his children, right? You don't have to think about a very specific way to go about it. Benjie, just talk to him. The same way you're talking to me right now. Talk to him.
That's it exactly.
And I loved that, Sharon, because when she said that was the first time that anybody had ever painted it to me in such a clear and really effortless way. And I think a lot of people, and just utilizing my own experience as a reference point, I think a lot of people will probably hold similar reservations where they're thinking that there's a specific way that they're supposed to go about this. And at the end of the day, people, you just have to have the conversation. Just talk. I love that. People, we're here on the line again with Sharon Dexter. We're discussing her amazing book, I Will Not Be Silent, Praying in Psalms. Available for purchase through Amazon as well as barnesandnoble.com. But listen, you're going to want to do yourself a favor and head over to godsfaithfulpromise.com. Purchase this book, but the other 9 titles that she has in store as well. Now, Sharon, as we start to close out of this fantastic narrative, because I do want to give you an opportunity to maybe talk about one of your other books, I'm curious, with regards to I Will Not Be Silent, what would you say was a highlight for you in writing the book? Or if not a highlight, you know, maybe something that surprised you that you weren't anticipating before you began on this journey?
I didn't believe it would be a whole book. I just started writing it, and it came about. I think God is my co-pilot throughout the whole thing, through every part of every book I've ever written. Sometimes I'm amazed at what comes out of my pen.
There you go. That's called inspiration, Sharon. I love that, right? When that little snowflake just continues to trickle in, right? And eventually those snowflakes will accumulate to a snowball. Now you have the image, and it just continues to grow. I love inspiration and really origin stories that way. Thank you very much for sharing. You know, Sharon, as I mentioned, we have a few extra moments here. Now, you have 9 other titles. My goodness. Sharon, that is beyond impressive, okay? Now, I want to give you the opportunity, and dealer's choice here. You can choose any one of the 9 titles, but please give us a brief description of one of the other titles that you've written.
I think Singing to the Silence was the second. And that one was just a book of poetry. All of the other 9 titles were poetry. And Singing to the Silence, it was singing into the silence of my soul.
That's incredible. Now, Sharon, you have 10 books that you've written, large part in poetry. Is there an 11th on the horizon? Talk to us. What's upcoming? What's next for you?
Well, the 11th was published. It's not on the website yet. It's called A Declaration of Faith.
There's already an 11th. So I guess the proper question should be, do you have a 12th on the horizon since the 11th has already been put out?
Don't think so. I'm pretty washed out by now.
Well, listen, we have more than enough to keep us occupied with those 11 titles. Sharon, this is absolutely incredible. As we close out, last question here. I love having this platform. I mentioned to you before in the pre-screening call, I'm an artist myself, Sharon. Now, I'm in a different medium, but I love having the platform to be able to pay it forward, in a sense, to other artists out there listening in. Now, in this instance, other writers out there. Now, you're someone that has written 11 titles, but not only written them, you've also gone the extra mile and gotten them published. And anybody that's been through the process, well, understands writing the book is only half the battle, right? So I would definitely be doing my listening audience a severe disservice if I didn't ask this next one. Sharon, what are some words of wisdom that you can offer to a new writer, someone listening in right now that's just starting out?
Keep trying. Perseverance is the key.
Love it. Short, sweet, concise, direct to the... Listen, people, ain't nothing to it but to do it, okay? Perseverance is the name of the game, and there's going to be obstacles. There's going to be adversity that you face. That's life. You can't escape it. What you can do is keep your head down and just keep plugging away. And eventually, that light at the end of the tunnel will continue to get bigger and bigger the closer you get, and your future self will thank you. I absolutely love that advice, people. And you know what I love even more? Is we're at the end of the interview now. We've discussed so much information with pertaining to her book, I Will Not Be Silent. But yet somehow we've barely scratched the surface. I mean, we haven't even gone into any of the actual discussions that she's had with God. You know what you have to do, people. Amazon, Barnes & Noble, God'sFaithfulPromise.com are the places you have to go. I Will Not Be Silent. Praying in Psalms is one of the titles you have to pick up. There's another 10 available for you right now. And Sharon Dexter is the author you have to thank for bringing these fantastic books to your table. You surely will not be disappointed. A wonderful book to add to your shelf, an even better gift to add to someone else's. So head on over there and pick up your copy today. Sharon, this has been an absolute pleasure. Such an honor. I truly mean that. Thank you once again for being a guest with us on People of Distinction.
Thank you very much, Benjie. I enjoyed it.